My name is Sienna Marquez. I am 28 years old, and what started as a normal engagement spiraled into something that still doesn't feel real when I say it out loud. I manage a sports bar in the city, the kind of place where regulars know what you drink before you sit down, and every big game feels like a holiday. That's where I met Daniel. He came in with friends one Friday night, ordered a whiskey neat, and spent half the evening making fun of my favorite team just to get my attention. He was a real estate agent, all sharp suits and easy smiles, and he had this tight-knit group of 5 friends from high school who felt like their own little club. 2 lawyers, a doctor, a finance executive, and a marketing director. They were all successful, all polished, and all fiercely loyal to each other. At first, I thought their closeness was sweet. I grew up in a family where people drifted in and out. Watching Daniel's friends show up for birthdays, promotions, bad days at work, it looked like the kind of chosen family you see in TV dramas. We dated for 4 years. After 1 year, we moved in together. The apartment was in my name, since I had better credit and a rental history with the building. He insisted it was just a formality and that we were building a life together anyway, so whose name was on the lease didn't matter. On the surface, everything was stable. Daniel was doing well in real estate, talking about eventually opening his own boutique agency. I was moving up in my company's management track, learning more about regional operations. Our families got along. His parents loved that I was hardworking and grounded. My mom adored that he helped with dishes whenever we hosted. It was all very normal, comfortable. He proposed last December on a weekend trip to the mountains. There were fairy lights on the cabin porch, snow in the trees, and a ring that sparkled in the firelight. I said yes, with my whole chest. We set a date in October and started planning almost immediately. That's when I noticed the shift. Daniel's friend group became very invested in our wedding. At first it was harmless. Pinterest boards, venue suggestions, playlists. Then it stopped being suggestions. They insisted on weighing in on every decision. The color palette, the food, the guest list. They held group meetings without me, and then presented their ideas like a committee reporting to a board. Anytime I pushed back, there would be a joke that wasn't really a joke. "You just don't understand event logistics, Sienna. It's not like managing a bar," one of them, a lawyer named Carly, would say with a tight smile. Another friend, Jenna, the finance executive, would laugh and add, "Yeah, this isn't exactly the same as game day wings and pitchers." They said it with teeth-baring smiles, but the message was clear. They thought they were above me. In mid-April, one of my regulars at the bar changed everything. Mark is a detective with the local PD, the kind of quiet regular who tips well and doesn't overshare. That night, he lingered after his shift beer, watching me refill a condiment rack with this look like he was trying to decide whether to jump off a cliff. "Sienna," he said finally, "I need to show you something, and I need you to understand I'm not doing this as a cop. I'm doing this as a friend." He pulled out his phone and swiped through a series of surveillance photos. They were from an ongoing investigation at an upscale hotel downtown, nothing to do with me. But the cameras had picked up collateral faces. I recognized one immediately. Daniel. His profile, his walk, the way he carried his shoulders. Daniel entering and leaving the hotel on multiple different nights. The other person in the photos made my stomach twist. Vanessa. I'd seen her once in an old picture on his social media tagged years ago. "That's my ex," he'd told me back then. We were young and stupid. Now she was a corporate lawyer, the kind you find on firm websites smiling in power suits. In the photos, they weren't just coincidentally crossing paths. They were arriving together, leaving together, close enough that there was no mistaking what was going on. Mark explained that Vanessa was connected to the case he was investigating, and that was how he'd noticed Daniel in the background. "I'm not investigating him," he said, "but if I were you, I'd want to know." I felt the world tilt. I finished my shift on autopilot, smiling at customers, and pouring drinks while my heart hammered against my ribs. As soon as I got home, I confronted Daniel. He was on the couch, laptop open, pretending to work on a listing presentation. "We need to talk," I said, my voice strained. He looked up, immediately wary. "What's wrong?" "Have you been meeting Vanessa at the Grand Crest Hotel?" I asked. His face went through a whole slideshow of emotions, confusion, fear, anger, before he settled on offended. "What? No. Why would you even ask that?" A detective came into the bar, I said. He showed me security photos from an investigation. You and Vanessa are in them, multiple times, going in and out together. The lie died on his lips. I watched it. His shoulders sagged. His eyes filled with tears, almost on cue. It was just physical, he blurted out. It was a mistake. It's over. It only went on for a couple of months. I stared at him. When did it start? He swallowed. February. He had been sleeping in my bed, kissing me goodnight, talking about honeymoon destinations, while sneaking off to a hotel with his ex-girlfriend for 2 months. I'm canceling the wedding, I said. My voice sounded strange in my own ears. Too calm. And you need to move out. You have 30 days. Our state's tenant laws are clear, even if your name isn't on the lease. You know that. He panicked. He begged. He grabbed my hands and cried about how his parents had already paid deposits, how his friends had booked flights. He told me he loved me, that Vanessa meant nothing, that we could get past this. I was done. I repeated myself. The wedding was off, and he needed to start packing. That's when he called his friends. Within an hour, all 5 of them were at our apartment door. They came in like a storm, heels clicking, voices raised, perfume and anger filling the room. Carly, the lawyer, pointed a manicured finger at me. You can't just throw him out. That's a legal eviction. You're being abusive and controlling. Jenna folded her arms. Do you realize how much money people have already spent on this wedding? Another friend grabbed a framed photo of my late grandmother from the shelf, looked me in the eye, and smashed it on the floor. Glass shattered at my feet. Something inside me snapped back into focus. All of you need to leave my apartment now, I said, my voice shaking but loud. If you don't, I'm calling the police. They laughed. One of them called me insane. Another filmed me on her phone, narrating like I was some feral animal. I dialed 911. That was when everything went from verbal abuse to something much worse. One of the women lunged for the kitchen, grabbed a knife from the block. Another tried to pin my arms behind my back. A third started punching me in the face and ribs, screaming that I was ruining her best friend's life. The other 2 joined in by trashing furniture and yelling threats. I remember the sharp sting as the knife grazed my arm when I twisted away, the dull thud of fists, the metallic taste of blood in my mouth. I remember thinking, in some detached way, that I might actually die in my own living room because I refused to marry a cheater. What I didn't know in that moment was that Mark had expected trouble. After he showed me the photos, he'd stayed alert. When I called 911, he was already on his way to my building. The police burst through the door just as the woman with the knife lunged again. They shouted commands. 2 of them refused to comply, still screaming at me, so the officers used tasers to bring them down. Even as they were being handcuffed on my living room floor, they showed no remorse. They kept yelling about how I was ruining their careers, their reputations, their lives. Daniel stood in the corner crying, asking me not to press charges because they were just trying to defend him. The officers documented everything. My torn, blood-stained shirt, the smashed photo, the overturned furniture, the knife, my injuries. They took statements. They took the women into custody. I spent the next 6 hours in the emergency room getting a deep laceration on my right arm, cleaned and stitched, 12 stitches, while a victim advocate from the DA's office sat beside my bed and gently explained that this wasn't going to be over quickly. There would be charges, hearings, court dates. By Monday, 3 of Daniel's friends were facing multiple felony counts: assault with a deadly weapon, aggravated battery, criminal threatening. The other 2 were charged with criminal mischief. All 5 were served with temporary restraining orders before they were even released. Lying in my hospital bed, arm throbbing, face bruised, I realized my life had been split cleanly in 2. Before the engagement, and after the night his friends tried to beat me into silence. I thought the worst was behind me. I was wrong. The morning after the attack, I woke up in my new apartment, if you could call it that. It was really just a spare room above my friend Aisha's garage, a temporary escape while I figured out what came next. My arm pulsed from the stitches, my face felt twice its size, and my phone vibrated every few minutes with new messages from numbers I didn't recognize. Detectives had already collected evidence from my apartment, but I still felt raw, carved out, hollow. I kept replaying the moment when the woman with the knife lunged, her eyes blazing with something unhinged. The memory came back like a flashbulb, too bright, too fast, too close. I made myself a weak cup of coffee, then turned on my phone. That was my first mistake. Dozens of notifications flooded the screen. Some were concerned messages from friends. Some were missed calls from work checking on me. And then, Daniel. When I opened his messages, a cold fury settled inside me. Please don't do this. You're blowing everything out of proportion. My friends were protecting me. This is all your fault. Call off the charges now. None of it mentioned the affair. None of it acknowledged what his friends had done to my body or my home. Every message was about him, his reputation, his wedding, his comfort. Then came the kicker. My lawyer girlfriend is going to help fix this. You'll regret making this a legal issue. Lawyer girlfriend. So Vanessa was no longer just an ex. She was now his ally, his protector, his co-strategist. I blocked him without replying. But blocking Daniel didn't stop the storm, because at 10:43 a.m., my bar's general manager called. Sienna, Daniel and a couple of his friends came to the bar during opening prep. His voice sounded strained. They were shouting, saying you attacked them, claiming you fabricated evidence. They told customers you have a history of emotional instability. My throat tightened. Please tell me they left. Security escorted them out, he said, but they caused a scene. HR says we should help you file a workplace protection order. We already have an attorney drafting it. I held the phone to my ear long after the call ended, staring at nothing. The air felt heavy, thick with the realization that Daniel wasn't just letting his friends fight his battles. He was co-leading the charge. By noon, social media had become a battlefield too. Clips from my apartment's hallway camera were circulating online, except they were heavily edited. They cut out the parts where I was punched, where the knife flashed in the air, where I screamed for help. Instead, they made it look like I was the aggressor. The captions were worse. Sienna attacks Daniel's friends in a jealous rage. Unstable woman tries to frame innocent professionals, bride-to-be, suffers mental breakdown and lies to police. I felt sick. My attorney Marla called me immediately. Do not respond. Do not comment. Do not post. We're subpoenaing the full footage from the building. Once the DA sees the unedited recordings, this will backfire so hard they'll choke on their own lies. She wasn't wrong. 2 days later, the building management turned over the complete security archives. Every second, every angle, every frame that showed Daniel's friends storming in, screaming, grabbing knives, throwing punches, smashing my belongings. Marla forwarded the files to the DA with a note. Please advise on next escalation. But the war wasn't done, not even close. Daniel's parents escalated things next. They showed up at my mother's house 3 times in 1 week. On the 4th visit, they banged on the door so hard the windows rattled. My father finally opened it and warned them to leave. They refused. His voice shook as he told me later. They said you ruined Daniel's life. They demanded we convince you to drop the charges. My parents filed their own restraining order. It was granted the same day. Meanwhile, Daniel and Vanessa sent threatening emails to me, to my attorney, and even to the detective who had shown me the hotel photos. Vanessa bragged about her connections in the DA's office. She claimed the charges would disappear. She mocked the idea that a bar manager could win a legal battle against professionals. Every threat, every smug line, every accusation was instantly forwarded to the DA and to the state bar. The state bar opened an ethics investigation into Vanessa within 72 hours. Her arrogance dug her own grave. The following weeks blurred together. Doctor visits, legal meetings, panic attacks that hit out of nowhere. Sometimes I'd drop a spoon in the sink and my whole body would flinch like a gunshot went off. I hated that Daniel's friends still lived inside my nerves. But there were small victories, and then there were big ones. The first big one came in late May. Marla called me with a voice that carried a rare tightness. One of them flipped, she said. The marketing director, the one who shattered your grandmother's picture frame. My breath caught. What do you mean she flipped? She came forward with evidence, Marla said, enough to blow open the entire case. The evidence was a group chat thread, a months-long conversation between Daniel and all 5 friends, and it was devastating. Screenshots showed plans to provoke me into an outburst, discussions of which angles the security cameras would capture, jokes about editing the footage to frame me as violent, Vanessa giving instructions on how to file a convincing false police report, Daniel strategizing how to use the evidence to justify his affair and protect his reputation. A message from Daniel saying, once she snaps, everyone will see she's unstable, helps with the breakup optics. I felt physically ill reading those lines. It wasn't just betrayal, it was orchestration, premeditation, a coordinated attempt to destroy my life. The DA's office called the evidence highly incriminating. They added conspiracy charges. They reopened Vanessa's bar investigation with renewed urgency, and they increased the recommended sentencing range for Daniel's three main attackers. But the most surreal moment came during the pre-trial hearing in June. Daniel's friends arrived in designer suits, flanked by high-powered attorneys, smirking as if the courtroom were beneath them. Then the prosecution played the unedited security footage on the courtroom screens. The room went silent except for the sound of fists hitting my body. Then came the group chat screenshots. Gasps rippled through the audience. Even the judge's expression hardened. Three of the women started crying. One threw up in her purse. Vanessa's jaw clenched like she was chewing glass. Daniel looked like he wanted to sink into the floor. Their attorneys asked the judge to suppress the group chat logs as private communication. The judge replied coldly, "They are evidence of a conspiracy to commit a violent felony." Their motions were denied. All of them. That day was the first time I felt the tide turn. Not completely, but enough to breathe again. Enough to believe that the truth, finally, had weight. And the real fight was only beginning. The trial began in early November, but if I'm being honest, it felt like the entire year had been preparing me for that courtroom. By the time I took my seat at the plaintiff's table beside Marla, my attorney, I wasn't the same woman who had once planned color palettes and floral arrangements while dreaming about a future with Daniel. I was someone rebuilt, stitched together, steadier, sharper. Traumatized, yes, but no longer breakable the way they hoped. The courtroom buzzed with an undercurrent of tension. Lawyers shuffled papers. Journalists whispered in the back row. Even the judge seemed to have an unspoken expectation in her posture. This case mattered, not because of me personally, but because people with power, legal, financial, social, had allegedly wielded that power like a weapon, and the court was ready to see it ironed out in daylight. When the bailiffs brought in Daniel's three main friends, the ones who had beaten me, it hit me unexpectedly hard. They no longer looked like polished professionals. They looked tired, pale, like the weight of the charges had finally cracked the glossy armor they'd spent years polishing. They were wearing simple blouses and slacks instead of designer suits. Their hair was pulled back. Their faces carried no makeup. But what struck me most was that none of them looked at me. Not once. Not at the beginning. Not during testimony. Not even at the end. Vanessa, Daniel's lawyer girlfriend, was in attendance too, though now she sat behind the defense table instead of beside Daniel. Her own bar investigation had intensified. She looked brittle, her confidence reduced to tight shoulders and forced stillness. And Daniel, God, he looked older, exhausted, angry, ashamed, all at once. The prosecution opened with a clear, devastating timeline. Daniel's affair with Vanessa, the coordinated smear campaign, the premeditated plan in the group chat, the violent ambush in my apartment, the attempt to manipulate evidence, the harassment that followed, the professional systems they exploited to cover it all up. Then came the evidence. The unedited security footage played on giant monitors. The sounds of my own screams filled the courtroom. I stared at the table the whole time, at my folded hands, at my bandaged arm in the footage, at the way one of them raised the knife. I didn't look up until it was over. Marla tapped my hand gently when it was my turn to testify. "You've already survived it," she whispered. "Now you're just telling the truth." My testimony lasted 2 full days. 2 days of describing their punches, explaining the bruises, detailing the fear, recounting Daniel's manipulation, narrating the months of harassment, identifying each attacker, reading their group chat messages aloud. The defense tried to paint me as unstable, emotional. The lead attorney even asked if I had exaggerated my emotional responses, implying I was too dramatic to be trusted. I just stared at him and said, "She tried to stab me. What response would you consider appropriately calm?" The courtroom went still. Even the jury leaned in. From that moment on, the defense struggled. Then came the testimony that changed everything. The marketing director, the friend who had flipped, took the stand. She looked shaken, paler than the others, more fragile, but determined. She admitted everything. The planning, the rehearsing, the lies, the strategy, the expectation that I'd lash out, the intent to record and edit footage, the hope that I'd look violent enough to justify Daniel's affair. She even revealed that Vanessa had coached Danielle on how to file a false abuse report without getting caught. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Daniel buried his face in his hands. Vanessa lowered her head. The judge called for silence twice. By the time closing arguments arrived, the prosecution didn't need theatrics. The evidence spoke on its own. Their argument was simple. These women weaponized their knowledge of the legal system. They used their positions, training, and influence to attempt the perfect social execution of an innocent woman. And when violence didn't go their way, they continued the attack in the shadows. Justice must meet them where their cruelty resides, deliberate, informed, and devastating. The jury deliberated for just 6 hours. When they returned, their faces were grave. Guilty on all counts. Sentencing was harsh, harsher than most expected. The judge emphasized that their professional status made their actions more egregious, not less. 36 months in state prison for the 3 attackers. No parole eligibility for 24 months. 5 years of probation after. Mandatory anger management. Mandatory restitution payments. The 2 who accepted plea deals earlier received probation and 300 hours of community service. The friend who cooperated received 12 months probation for her lesser role. Then came Daniel's turn. Evidence showed he helped orchestrate the confrontation, helped file the false report, and joined in the harassment. He was charged with conspiracy, filing false police reports, fraud, attempted evidence tampering. His real estate license was suspended, with revocation likely. And Vanessa, Daniel's lawyer girlfriend, her entire career collapsed faster than I imagined possible. The bar found multiple ethics violations: filing false reports, witness tampering, attempting to influence the grand jury, providing legal strategy for a planned assault. She was disbarred and now faces her own criminal charges. By December, Daniel's parents were sued for intentional infliction of emotional distress for their harassment. They settled for $25,000 after their attorney advised them they'd lose badly at trial. After the settlement, they moved to another state and started family counseling. I heard they finally began confronting how much they enabled Daniel. The consequences didn't end there. The women's employers launched internal investigations. Their licenses were permanently revoked. Their reputations were ruined. Civil suits piled up. The apartment complex sued for property damage and reputational harm. Their legal bills exceeded $200,000 each. Meanwhile, my life finally started to rebuild. Corporate promoted me to regional manager, officially overseeing 5 bar locations. My boss said the company admired how calmly and professionally I documented everything during the ordeal. They implemented my documentation templates across all stores. Mark, the detective who showed me the photos, became a close friend. His guidance changed everything. He taught me how to document threats, archive digital evidence, and stay ahead of manipulative people with resources. I moved into a new apartment in January, a secure building with reinforced entrances. The property management company installed extra security features at no cost after reading the case summary. Therapy helped more than I expected. Trauma made everything sharper and softer at the same time. I'd jump at loud noises but smile at quiet mornings. I'd wake up sweating from nightmares but feel comforted knowing the people who hurt me were behind bars. I started rebuilding my social circle, meeting new people through Mark, through work, through support groups. One of his friends, a kind, gentle restaurant consultant, eventually became someone I looked forward to seeing. Someone steady. Someone who didn't talk over me, or lie to me, or treat me like I owed him my silence. Life didn't magically fix itself, but the air got lighter, and I could finally breathe without fear tightening my ribs. I'm telling this story now because the restraining orders have been made permanent, the appeals have been denied, and the entire case is public record. There's no more hiding, no more waiting for the other shoe to drop, no more wondering if speaking the truth will somehow make things worse. If you're reading this and you've ever been manipulated, gaslit, dismissed, or painted as unstable for refusing to tolerate abuse, listen to me carefully. Document everything. Tell the truth. Stand firm. The truth has a funny way of surviving even when powerful people try to bury it. I survived because I refused to play the villain in their story. And in the end, the world saw exactly who the villains truly were,